Close your eyes and picture an isolated island. It usually looks like a sanctuary: white sand, warm water, and a quiet shoreline far removed from the noise of civilization. But isolation is only a luxury when the land cooperates. When an island's ecosystem turns actively hostile, the surrounding ocean stops acting as a protective moat. It becomes an inescapable wall. Miyake-jima, a small island resting roughly 180 kilometers south of Tokyo, is built directly on top of an active volcanic vent. In the year 2000, Mount Oyama erupted, saturating the air with toxic gas. The Japanese government was forced to evacuate the entire population of 3,800 people. The massive sulfur dioxide emissions made breathing the outside air lethal. 5 years later, residents were allowed to return, but the volcano hadn't stopped venting. Today, the local government requires every citizen to carry a gas mask at all times. When the atmospheric sirens sound, everyone on the island has roughly 90 seconds to secure their masks. Toddlers have masks specially fitted by their parents, and local schools run gas mask drills as routinely as fire drills. Miyake-jima represents the initial tier of isolation. It is an environment where the ground itself periodically attempts to suffocate the population. A different kind of environmental rejection happens off the coast of Madagascar. Reunion Island is a French territory with dramatic volcanic mountains and coastal breaks that once made it a world-class surfing destination. However, those same warm, turbid waters support a marine ecosystem with a severe cost. Since 2011, Reunion has recorded more fatal shark attacks per kilometer of coastline than anywhere else on Earth, driven primarily by large, aggressive bull sharks hunting near the river mouths. The fatality rate became so high that the French government implemented total bans on swimming and surfing along most of the western shoreline. They installed underwater nets and authorized culling programs to thin the bull shark population, forcing locals to treat their own waters as restricted territory. While the waters around Reunion are guarded by sharks, the land itself is occupied on Ramri Island in Myanmar. The island is bordered by a 10-mile-wide mangrove swamp inhabited by one of the densest populations of saltwater crocodiles in Southeast Asia. These are territorial, nocturnal hunters capable of growing over 6 meters long. In February 1945, roughly 1,000 Japanese soldiers retreated into the swamp at night to escape a British military advance. Wounded and wading through waist-deep water, the soldiers became trapped in the predator's territory. By morning, an estimated 500 men had been killed by crocodiles. Nature enforces its own borders through toxic air of apex predators, turning a geographic haven into an active combat zone. These environmental dangers provide the blueprint for the more calculated exclusion zones engineered by human governments. For global superpowers, an isolated island offers utility. Away from the mainland and hidden from the public eye, these disconnected landmasses serve as expendable laboratories for warfare. Okunoshima is a small island in Japan, currently famous for being overrun by hundreds of friendly, feral rabbits that approach tourists for food. But during the Second World War, the Imperial Japanese Army operated a secret chemical weapons facility here, erasing the island entirely from official maps. Between 1929 and 1945, the factory produced over 6,000 tons of mustard gas, phosgene, and tear gas. When the war ended, the disposal of these stockpiles was rushed, and environmental surveys still detect toxic contamination buried in the soil beneath the rabbit trails today. Around the same time, the British government found its own isolated testing ground on the northwest coast of Scotland. In 1942, they initiated Operation Vegetarian on the small landmass of Grunard Island. The military brought a flock of sheep to the island and detonated experimental bombs packed with Bacillus anthracis, the bacteria responsible for anthrax. The sheep died within days, and the spores settled deep into the earth. Anthrax spores are incredibly durable, capable of remaining lethal to mammals for decades. Grunard Island was placed under an absolute quarantine that lasted 48 years, sitting untouched until the government finally stripped the topsoil and sprayed 280 tons of formaldehyde across the island in the late 1980s. When a military needs to test a lethal compound, geographic isolation ensures the resulting damage occurs far away from public scrutiny. Biological experiments leave the landmass physically intact. During the Cold War, the United States military required a testing ground for weapons designed to remove geography altogether. Between 1946 and 1958, they detonated 23 nuclear bombs at Bikini Atoll. The largest of these tests was Castle Bravo. The explosion generated a fireball 7 kilometers wide and instantly vaporized 3 entire islands within the atoll. The blast left a crater over 2 kilometers wide that is still visible on the ocean floor today. Shifting winds pushed a massive cloud of radioactive fallout across 18,000 square kilometers, raining lethal ash onto neighboring atolls. This embedded cesium-137 into the food chain. Thyroid cancer rates spiked to 30 times the baseline as radiation moved from the soil into the wildlife. Before the first bomb fell, the military relocated the 167 indigenous residents of Bikini Atoll, promising them a temporary move. 78 years later, their ancestral home remains too radioactive to safely inhabit. Displacement doesn't always require a nuclear explosion. In the Indian Ocean, a Chagosian community of roughly 2,000 people lived on the coral atoll of Diego Garcia for over 2 centuries, building a life around coconut plantations and local fishing grounds. In 1966, the British government signed a secret agreement to lease the island to the United States. The Chagosians were removed to make way for a massive naval facility, a bomber runway, and a classified intelligence hub. These sites illustrate the power of sovereign states to remove entire communities once a piece of isolated land becomes strategically valuable. The final stage of isolation happens when outside authority vanishes completely, leaving a stranded population entirely alone to survive within a collapsing social structure. In 1914, the Mexican government maintained a small military garrison on the barren coral atoll of Clipperton Island. When the Mexican Revolution broke out on the mainland, the supply ships abruptly stopped coming. Cut off from the world, the garrison's settlement deteriorated. The central lagoon turned toxic, and scurvy ravaged the survivors. Soon, the barren coral ground was swarming with millions of crabs feeding on the dead. Over the next 2 years, the conditions killed off nearly everyone. By 1917, only one adult male was left alive, a lighthouse keeper named Victoriano Alvarez, surrounded by a small group of surviving women and children. Realizing no one was coming to hold him accountable, Alvarez seized the garrison's remaining rifles. He declared himself the king of Clipperton Island, using his monopoly on violence to enslave and terrorize the surviving women. On July 18, 1917, the surviving women rose up and executed Alvarez with a hammer. Moments later, a United States Navy gunboat discovered the island by accident and rescued the survivors. Clipperton has been abandoned for over a century. The island stands as the final case study in isolation, a demonstration that when rescue is impossible and legal authority vanishes, the psychological breakdown of the survivors becomes the primary threat to their existence.